Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Fix My Fees podcast, where merchant services is so boring. I bring on interesting people and pick their brain about what's cool about what they're doing. And hopefully you guys learned something. I am your host, Tavius Washington. And today I decided I'm moving personally in direction of trying to become a better leader. And when I felt that, I felt like there's a lot of people that are going through the same thing. So normally there's a lot of marketers and other people that I bring on, but this person has actually been transforming leadership and communication since the year that I've been born.
Oh my gosh, Tavius, you're making me feel old.
But he's been doing amazing things, really focusing on kind of like every level from the conversation to the pitch, because he really genuinely believes how you speak and how you write is going to influence everything that you're doing. And so I'm proud to bring on someone who's an amazing leadership coach, but also the host of the Inspire podcast, which is a top 50 business podcast, Bart Egnal, right? Am I pronouncing it right?
You got it.
Okay, awesome.
How
you doing today, Bart?
You passed the first test. I'm well, Octavius. Thanks for having me on the pod, and thanks for that great introduction. I love your authenticity about your own business, and good on you. So good to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. So one of the things that when we hear about leadership, people kind of always immediately think like managers or CEOs or just like that. And for me, it feels like leadership is anything people will follow you behind, whether it's for fear or whether it's for love. But from your side of it, since you've dealt with this so far, what do you define or what do you see as leadership, so we can start the conversation from there?
Yeah, I think it's the exact right place to start, and it's where we start all of our training. And just super quick context. I'm the CEO of the Humphrey Group. We're a global leadership training company. We have over 50 people. We work with Fortune 500, and yes, we work with CEOs to your point, but the bulk of the people we work with are not CEOs, right? They're managers, and increasingly, I'd say over the last decade, there are people who don't manage anyone, right? And you think about someone who maybe they aspire to be a leader, but maybe they're an investment banker, right? And their goal is to inspire clients to choose them instead of a competitor. Or they are someone who is an individual contributor, or they're someone who is, having to influence across the organization. So say they're project manager, but the leadership that they have to show is to other parts of the organization that do not report to them, but whom they need to engage to get what they need done. So you're absolutely right that the ability to lead does not have anything to do with your title. It doesn't have anything to do with the number of people who report to you. It doesn't even have to do with where you sit in the organization. It really stems from your ability to influence and inspire people to want to follow you. And I do think it's important to say want to follow. You mentioned through fear. I think we all work for people or listen to people where, maybe you do something because you're afraid of, losing your job or not getting a deal or something. But as soon as that fear disappears, and it usually does, you no longer do anything that person wants you to do. And even when you have to do it, you don't give your best effort. So that's the kind of leadership we're aspiring to, one where people want to be inspired and follow you.
See, that's why I wanted to start there, because, my thought, and I never thought about the fact that technically there is leadership in cross departments, even if you're hey, I'm the sole marketer, but because I have to connect with the sales and then I have to give the numbers to these, there is a leadership aspect to how you're running that too. I never thought about how that can cross platform, or even, someone solo who wants someone to invest with them for the long term, like you said, with the banker. I didn't think about that. So
totally.
How did leadership become the thing that you wanted to teach? Because leaders are probably some of the most stubborn people when they're doing it the right way. And I feel like those are the people who are coming to you the most. So how did you even get into this and decide?
So I joined the business in 2001. I guess that's when you're born. So
I was born in 88. I saw that.
Yeah, you're 88. I was born in 79. So I joined the Humphrey Group out of university in 2001. And back then, so my mom started the business in 88. And so that's when
where
you were born. That's where you got the year. No, I'm not. Okay, I'm not quite that old. So I feel a bit better now that we're getting the dates right. But when I joined, she built a business as a speechwriter. So she would write speeches for CEOs, and then we had coaches who were actors who would coach them on presence. And so when I joined, I became a speechwriter. And so I was learning to help CEOs craft and write their ideas, and then also coach them on how to deliver those. And back then it was all speeches. And what I found was executives really wanted to be able to reach their audiences, and they didn't quite know how. a lot of what they had to communicate was just like boring, to be honest. You know, it was information. This was even before PowerPoint. We had actually slides, acetates that you would put on an overhead projector. Now I feel really old. Yeah, exactly. You know, maybe scratch it on a stone tablet. But they wanted to be able to reach people. They wanted to be able to inspire. And then what I saw was that they wanted their people to be able to do that. And so I started building out the business into, you know, still coaching, but also training. And what was going on was, you know, as communication became, as technology came, communication became much faster. Email was accelerating, PowerPoint, you know, and all of these, the frequency of communication was rising, the formality was declining, and the number of people who had to communicate to be successful in their job was growing. And so really that became the business, was training and teaching people. And I kind of built out that training business and to meet that demand. And, you know, and so when you say what led me to it, what I saw was that people were hungry, really hungry. They had ideas that they thought should be implemented in companies, and they didn't know how to convey them. You know, just as an example, we had like a big mining company we worked with, Gold Corp, you know, global mining company. And they had supervisors, people who like would go down into a pit, you know, every day and run a crew. And they would say, you know, oh, we should do this to make this a safer workplace. But they didn't know how to communicate that to management. And so as part of training, we would work with them to define and express their ideas in a way that led to the management saying, yeah, let's make that change, not just at your mind, but everywhere. So I saw, you know, I would say to your point, they weren't actually stubborn. People were confident. They knew there were things that should happen, and they were looking for the tools and support to be able to get those ideas across. And that's where we came in.
Got it. Okay. I like that. It became something that you kind of fell into a little bit, but you liked it and you really started to grab it, you know, pulled you into it.
That's right.
And so as people are working through it, and I can usually like this question because I think a lot of people already have certain things and values in their head. Mm-hmm. What is the thing that people get wrong about leadership, right? When it comes to either being a leader or growing as a leader, what do people do?
Well, I think there are a couple things that I see that people get wrong about leadership. And typically, just for context, we meet people in their kind of mid careers, right? So they're, you know, they've moved up in the organization and now they're starting to be in a role where they have to be influential, or they're starting to manage people, or we'll meet people when they're already executives. So I'd say the first thing that people get wrong is that they assume that how they have communicated in their career up until that point and has led to multiple promotions and success is how they should continue to communicate. And, you know, if you think about someone who joins an accounting firm, right? Like they'll come in and out of school, they'll learn to do audits, then they'll learn, you know, to explain their results, to write memos. Maybe they'll manage a team of people doing this. And then one day they reach the level where they're saying, okay, you know, we think you'll be a partner in the firm. And they say, oh, that's great. I'm going to be a partner. And they'll say, okay, yeah, you've got to go out and you've got to win business for the firm. And they go talk to clients, and the clients are like, well, you know, you're my accountant, but I don't really feel energized by you. I don't want to take additional services. Consider using other parts of the firm. And so they've never understood that. They never learned the skills that they now require. So I'd say that's assumption one, that what got you there in terms of your leadership and communication skills will serve you going forward. You have to develop new skills. And I would say a second assumption that is wrong is that there is one, like, that you have to kind of play this part of a leader, that this is what, you know, capital L leadership is. You know, you've got to make these decisions decisively. You've got to speak with confidence even when you're not, you know, and I think, you
motivate your team every day.
Get them pumped up. and you know, that's to be the cheerleader. And you know, you do have to think intentionally about how you're going to lead through communication. But at the heart of success is authenticity. And so it's really understanding how to achieve your goals as a leader while being authentic. So those would be two major mistaken assumptions I see.
Well, how does, like, let's say someone, as they're moving up that ladder, right, they're becoming a leader, you know, they're trying to figure out like what the delegation part of becoming a leader, but they're so embedded in it. What I see a lot of people do is they move up into leadership, yet they keep hold of the same roles and the same help that they've been doing while also having new responsibilities of everything else. And so why do people do that? Why is it hard for them to let go and actually start to delegate in those new roles?
Yeah. And it's so frustrating if you're working for someone who's been promoted. You're like, listen, they promoted you, so you don't have to do this work anymore. Like, you're killing me here. You know, right. So why does this happen? Well, there are a number of different reasons. One is comfort. You know, if you have been promoted because you're really good at doing the work, it's challenging. You may be better at the work than the people who work for you. It can be comforting to do it and tempting to do it for people because you can do it better. I'd say another that I see is that the organization may be like, they may not create a climate where they accept mistakes. And so the leader may feel they have no choice but to kind of do it all themselves. And then lastly, I would say that leaders who are doing that may not have learned how to communicate in a way that empowers people. I just finished a call with a chief human resources officer of a bank, and she was telling me about their CEO who will kind of skip 4 levels and call someone he knows to fix it, to do something. And it's totally disempowering to the person who's in charge. And he's just not able to energize them. So there are a whole host of reasons, but whatever the reason, it has negative effects for everyone.
Right. Because when you're not letting go. Oh, I do like that comparison. That is like not letting go, just jumping over. Because even if that first level could have gotten it done, you saved everybody else headache, and that headache starts from the top. If that person's calling, like you said, 4 levels above, everybody else is like, well, now I look bad. Now I'm thrown on the bus because it's as if I couldn't do it and it has to go.
Why am I even here? All right.
So on the other end of it, I know we talked about what people get wrong. What do you wish people knew more of? Like when people came to you and start working with you, what do you wish they already knew about leadership?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is you have to understand like that success in your role is not about information, but about inspiration. In other words, you have to think about, look, this is what I'm trying to achieve as a leader. Who are the people who I want to move? And they may be your direct reports, but usually they're not. Usually it's your customers, your peers, executives who you report to. So really starting with that mindset of inspiration. And I'd say the second thing is the vision that you have. And, I say vision, you might think, I have a dream, like, amazing, whether it's Martin Luther King or a presidential address, right? No, I'm talking about something much more concrete. It's like for your vision could be for if you go meet with a customer, hey, here's my vision for what we're going to do for your business in a year. It could be if you're meeting with an employee, here's my vision for your career, right? So in other words, a vision is really a future state that you articulate that you want, that others are going to be inspired to follow and work towards. So I'd say that's the second thing I wish people have. And then the third and final thing I would say I wish people would come to me is an understanding that success in the moment comes from preparation ahead of time in communication. I mean, it's like that in take sports, right? When you watch someone, if you see the quarterback throw the ball, it's almost unconscious, right? They just, boom. But you think about the number of times in practice they've thrown to that wide receiver, right? And to the point where it's just second nature. So the people who look like they're natural communicators have worked unnaturally hard to get that good. You do have to put the work in.
How does one prepare? Because I know we talk a lot about culture, right? And leaderships need to build a culture that follows you to the same goal. And that can be very, so how can one prepare for something like that when you're already in it, right? And in the trenches and you already have a culture. Yeah. It's like,
well, shaping culture is both an incredibly important priority for leaders and very difficult. And you alluded to one of the reasons so it's difficult is that culture is formed by many people, right? And if you run the team, but you're part of, a 5,000 person organization, you're not going to shape the culture for the whole organization. You can hope that the culture of the organization is aligned generally with what you're after. And you do have to look at it and say, is there enough alignment that I'll be successful here? If you're someone who is people centric and you have certain values about how you want people to be treated and expectations around performance and the organization that you're in is not aligned with that, the odds of you changing it are low. I'll just tell you, so you have to evaluate as a leader and say, can I be successful here? Or am I going to be swimming against the tide? Right. Now, if you're CEO, maybe you can say, I want to bring people in who are going to change this culture, but it's challenging. Now, what you can say is, all right, there's enough alignment. Hopefully if you've been there or you've chosen to be there's enough alignment. Then you can look at your own team and say, all right, what's the culture I'm going to shape? And part of it is communication, right? It's intentionally communicating the culture you want to have, creating psychological safety for people to be part of that. And then part of it are the actions. I mean, they say, culture, how do you measure culture? It's how people act when they think no one's watching, right? So the behaviors that you model are as important as the words that you articulate in terms of the culture that you want. So yeah, that's the kind of short answer to a very long and complex problem for leaders.
Right. That's something you got to build out.
Right.
Definitely understand that.
Yeah.
But
and I had an experience when I bought the company. I was running, so I'd moved in 2009 to Vancouver, BC, just north of Washington State, and built out the business. I'd grown it. I expanded into Mexico. And then I bought the company in 2012 and took over as the owner and CEO in 2014. And when I did that, I moved back to Toronto, which is where I live. And, I thought it was pretty hot stuff. I'd kind of had a lot of success. I'd grown the business significantly. And, I felt I had great relationships with the people who worked for me. And so I thought, yeah, man, just killing it here. The culture is great. And so I had the head of HR and she said, I think we should do a culture survey. So I said, sure. And we did it. Now, I'll never forget getting the results. It was a combination of things that people filled out in interviews. I was traveling through New York and I got the email with the report and I opened it up and it was really negative. It was really negative, and it said the culture is one where it's performer perish is probably the way it described it. Either you deliver the results or you're gone. And it was very viewed as cutthroat.
Right.
And it was a shock to me because there was this moment where what I thought the culture was not the culture that I'd created. And it really led me to some major changes over the years in my own leadership style. And then in the immediate aftermath, parting ways with some of my very senior people who denied that this was a real issue. So, culture change is a very painful process to go through and it often requires some difficult decisions.
Right. Well, yeah. Speaking of that, there is that essence of leadership that deals with the side of the difficult decisions, whether people are making them too fast or people take too long to make them, which, can be a whole different thing. How do you help someone who has that problem of making difficult decisions?
Yeah. I mean, if you're in an executive or leadership role, the easy decisions are all made before they get to you. Right.
True.
If you have a team and if you've done a good job of empowering them, they shouldn't need to bring the simple decisions to you. They should have made those decisions already. So by default, the decisions that are coming to you are like the, 60-40, decisions or 55-45 decisions where there are trade-offs in them. And, so in addition to being a coach, I'm an entrepreneur. I, run the company. And so I coach people, but I'm also been in that position of having to make difficult decisions. And, I think my personal philosophy is, first to engage the people who are going to have to own the ramifications of the decision. You want them to have a voice. You want them to participate. And then second, to make a decision, a paralysis by analysis, you never is worse than making a mediocre decision, right? Than making the wrong call.
Yes.
So that's just my philosophy. And again, you hope as a leader that you get into an organization where you are empowered to make those decisions and make those calls. And if not, you may have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I think you're right. One of the things that you were talking about earlier is how people are scared of the results, right? They're scared of if things are perfect and making the wrong decision of firing someone, removing someone is like that fear of what happens now.
Right.
I think people get kind of stuck with. But you're right. That analysis paralysis, I've seen so many times in so many companies where they go back and they're like, oh, If we would have got rid of him like 7 months ago, we probably
Yeah.
would have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And that is a great example. I cannot tell you how much, as an entrepreneur, I have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurs. And often they'll call, because we'll chat and we'll support each other. And they'll say, oh, I'm thinking about this person. He or she is not performing. How long have they been with you all? For a year, 2 years of this underperformance. I've been working with them. I've got them coached. Blah, blah. It's like, and then I was like, just go. Just, what you need to do. Just do it. Right. And then they let the person go and they're like, why didn't I do that 6 months ago, 9 months ago? And so we do have, there's two things I reflect on as to why this is the case. One is the behavioral economics principle of loss aversion, which means that humans fear the pain of a loss more than they can appreciate a gain. And so when you have someone who's like mediocre, you think, oh, I have to lose, I have to replace this. I'll lose that they do well, then that. You don't think about what you'll gain by not having them there or by the new person. Yeah. And then the second thing is these are imperfect decisions. So you have a, classic one is you'll have a salesperson who produces a lot of revenue, but they're toxic. And you think, well, they're really bad. They're bad for morale, but what's it going to cost me if I get rid of them? And I used to play a lot of poker, and in poker, you really, even if you make the best decision, right, you're still only going to win. Say, like if you have the best starting hand against the second best, like aces against kings, you're still going to only win 80% of the time. So you have to separate as an executive, as a leader. You sometimes have to separate the outcome from the decision. You have to say, this was the optimal decision. Even if the outcome didn't work out perfectly, if you make enough of those optimal decisions over time, you'll usually be successful. But I think those two principles kind of come to why imperfect decisions and outcomes and loss aversion are why people hesitate quite often.
Yeah, people are scared to gain the experience you need to make educated decisions in the future.
Yeah. And even when you gain it, there's never a perfect decision. Everything is a balance of risk. And so
we see that with a lot of sports teams. How many times have they let go of somebody only for them to thrive somewhere else, and everyone else is like, no, but then they're like, yeah, but you don't understand what happened on our end, right? The business end of it.
That's right. And I think that's just it. It's like you look at they'll hold on to someone who's a high performer but toxic, and then like are you an NFL fan?
Yes, I am an NFL fan.
Yeah, so I'm a big NFL fan, right? And Philadelphia Eagles are my team. My dad's from Philly. So, they just parted ways with Antonio Brown, right? And, great player, but they wisely just said, look, what we're going to gain is more harmony, even though there's what we're going to lose. And we have to just believe that the team above player. And so when you have kind of a certainty around how you're going to operate, and they got a first round pick for him too, so not too bad.
Nothing bad about that.
Nothing bad about that. So yeah, it's but there are no easy decisions, right? If he goes and has an amazing year, some people say, oh, it was a mistake.
Yeah. I'm going to make sure that we can keep having a fun conversation as a Cowboys fan myself. So.
I'm surprised this podcast isn't going to end. No, you guys are set up well, despite Jerry, for the year ahead.
Leadership problems, right? Sometimes it's not even the coach. It could be somebody above who's just continuously sabotaging.
The reality is, accountability as well, right? For Jerry, right? Like, who's he accountable to? Himself.
Right. Up and down, up and down.
That's right.
So to kind of bring this back, I want to I'm just interested to hear a bragging story. I really want to hear about someone who came to you wanting to help. Maybe it was a business, maybe it was an individual. It can be whatever you want. But someone who came to you and maybe felt like they could do it without you, or they could maybe figure it out, and then they decided to work with you, and kind of what happened afterward. But do you have any kind of case studies that stick out to you that are good?
Well, I'm trying to think if I had someone who thought they could do it without me and then didn't. That's, it's kind of rare for someone to say, like, I don't think I need you, and then work with you. But what does happen, so just two stories, what does sometimes happen, like, so one of the niche things that I do is I work with publicly traded companies, that have to report to investors. And so every quarter they have to do what's called an earnings call, where the executives go on and they say, this is what happened in the last 3 months, and here are our financial results. And then they take questions. And then they meet with, and between these quarterly calls, they meet with investors. And so I work with these teams to help them tell a compelling story, because the process of selling a company to the public is storytelling, right? And so a lot of like I think about one company, a Fortune 500 company, where we were brought in by the investor relations people, and they had a big investor day where they brought in all their investors and their analysts, and the executives said, who is this guy and what's he doing here? Like, we don't need this. We know our business. Like, why do we need to work with Bart and the Humphrey Group? And, we spent a lot of time just looking like, what is the story? They know their business, but they didn't know how to tell the story as a group.
Right.
And by the end, they thought, a couple of them came up and said, this has been incredibly valuable. We now understand that our knowledge of the business wasn't translating to the most compelling story. And we continue to work together to this day. So again, incredibly brilliant people built, a wonderful business. And yet going from, I know my business to I have to tell the story about my business was a skill that they didn't have.
Yeah.
And then the second example, on a different scale, I was introduced maybe 5 years ago by one of my clients to someone who was building a private equity firm in what's called the secondary space. So they buy, and I didn't know what secondaries were. So he explained to me, they buy private equity from organizations that have too much of it and want to sell at a discount. So, you'll have people who own SpaceX and they say, we're not waiting for it to go public, so we want to sell it. And so they buy it and then sell it. So incredibly successful firm, but he said, I need help to explain what we do. And so worked with him and then started working with his team, and ultimately led them to, be able to grow their, investment book, because they got so proficient at telling the story. And it was really a nice moment. They had me on their company trip last summer. And, I said, look, you guys just don't need me anymore. You now know how to do this. And so those are kind of one giant company, one small company, but two examples of, what makes my work so rewarding.
I like that. Do you find that often people, when they're experts in their field, have a hard time of being able to relay what it is that they're doing or how it is that they're going to accomplish it to their clients?
Yeah, there's this concept called the curse of knowledge, which is that the more you know about something, the less perspective you have about how little everyone else knows about it.
Yes.
And so it becomes, whether it's using jargon, I wrote a whole book on jargon and language, whether it's using jargon or assuming that people understand your frame of reference, generally the people who become increasingly specialized struggle to translate it for their audiences. So yeah, that's very common.
Yeah. I thought about that because it does feel like that, you run into that a lot. Like even with me, I had been in sales for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I had so many conversations. Sometimes I would tune out. I just know what you're going to say, how you're going to say, what's going to happen next. I know what's going to, and so it becomes hard, but then you still need to be engaged. You still need to be able to talk in a way that's coherent. And sometimes you need to be able to take stuff and go, all right, well, how can I explain it to a fifth grader so that someone can digest it?
Exactly.
I think those are hard.
And that's hard. That's actually very hard.
Very hard.
To bring, like, people think, like, I sometimes feel, it's dumbing it down. No, it's actually takes incredible intellectual capability to compress complexity into clarity.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is something that takes work. And that's going back to what I was saying when you asked me, what do I wish people would know? It's that you're going to have to work to get to clarity of an idea. Right. And if it's not clear, then people aren't going to get it because it'll take too long. And in this attention economy, no one's going to take the time.
Right. Right. We have a very short attention span. We're designed.
Yeah. What was that? I wasn't listening. As soon as you said Cowboys, I heard Cowboys.
That's exactly what happens. You start scrolling, you say one thing, it's just
that's right. That's right.
So, how do you work with people? What are the types of businesses or people that you're working with? Where should they be at in their journey when they're like coming to you? Who should be working with you?
Yeah, well, and I'll just broaden the lens from me to my whole company, the Humphrey Group. We probably have a couple thousand people a year we work with. So there's a wide range, right, of people who come to us. But I would say, just broadly speaking, probably 90% of the people we work with are corporate corporations, 10% are in governments. Okay. So it's mostly companies. And when I say government, I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about the bureau, people working in bureaucracies. And the size of organizations that we work with vary. We work with large, Fortune 500 companies, but we also work with smaller organizations as well. Someone, like that individual I told you about who was building this great firm in private equity is, 20 people in the firm, but incredible impact. So there's a range, and I think there's a range because in whatever size industry or company you're in, the skills that you require in terms of influence are there. Now, the last point I'll just say is where, and so we work across all functions from finance to, sales to HR, literally there's not a function in the company we haven't worked with technology. Now, where do people come to? At what level do people come to us? Usually people come to us when they're at either mid-career or senior, right? People are just starting off, honestly, there's great content out there. You can, hey, listen to my podcast. We'll link to it in the show notes. But you can educate yourself, and you probably just need to build your career up early and start and, educating yourself about what influence and leadership mean. But I'd say the first major kind of moment in time when people say, they come into contact with us is when they're at a point where influence has become as important as technical capability or expertise, right? So they're not just, an expert or subject matter expert or someone who knows about a product. They have to get people to do things, right? Right. And often that's from a formal request to become a manager, right? The company has said, you've been so good as a salesperson, we're going to put you in charge of salespeople. You're a great, IT coder. Why don't you run a team of right. And it's this change, right? And with that, they begin having interactions not only with direct reports, but also with more senior management, right? Where they're going to management meetings and how they comport themselves and happen there. So I would say that's the first point. The second point in careers that people would typically come to us is they've been doing that for a while, and now they're at kind of, I would say, mid to upper management, right? So maybe they're vice president in a large, in a bank or a tech company. They're managing a large team. They're kind of the meat in the sandwich, right? They're between the very senior executives and the organization. Their job in some way, whatever their function is, to take the strategy of the organization and drive it in. And so they're very much at this point where influence is key to their success, and the level of influence they can have will determine how well they do. So that's kind of a second cohort. And often companies will invest heavily there. And so we'll do group training, we'll do skill development, maybe even some coaching as well. And then the last and most senior group are executives. And, executives spend I'd say 90% of their job is influence based. They might have to deal with a board. They might have to deal with external shareholders. They might have to deal with, they deal with each other. The politics, people say politics, but politics is really just a word for influence, right? You have to manage competing interests. Like if you look at a company, there's only so much capital to allocate. So are you getting the capital? Is someone else getting capital? And so that skill set, that heightened need to understand how to influence, build credibility, and win people over becomes all important. So those are, I would say, the three key entry points.
I like that. Because I was trying to figure out, because I know you have So Dynamic, and wanted to know, you know what? Are there certain things, like if someone may be feeling like they may not fit those buckets, but they may be able to help, is there certain questions or thoughts that someone may be having in their head before they come to you, like a certain kind of reaction?
You'll see people, they'll kind of hit roadblocks, right? So they'll be told, some typical things that people will tell us when they come to us. Someone will say, well, I've been passed over for promotion 3 or 4 times. And when I ask why, because I see that people get promoted, they are not as good at what I do as I am at what I do. They'll say, well, it's you need more gravitas or executive presence, right? So that's one example. Or another person will say, I'm going into a role where I'm anxious or apprehensive about trying to get people to do things. Like now I have to win business, for example. That's a very common one in professional services. Like I'm going from just doing the work to winning clients, and no one's explaining to me how to do this. So that would be another example. Or, you'll have people who are in the role, but they they're kind of doubting their abilities. Whenever I go and deal to this executive meeting, I feel insecure. I get talked over. People don't listen to me. And so I need to be more effective. So those would be kind of 3 typical things that people would come to us saying.
I like that. I like that. And if there is anything you want them to know about you and then how they can reach out to you if they want to know more, can you tell them what they need to know about you, your company,
your
capabilities, and how they can reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Check out our website, and we have, first of all, tons of free stuff in terms of content there. I do a podcast, we do a blog, connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with the Humphrey Group on LinkedIn, and just like hoover up all of our content. It's great, and then we offer, even beyond that, we do free webinars. Like we have probably every 6 to 8 weeks, we have a absolutely free webinar. We get hundreds of people come out that do a deep dive. Like we've just done one, actually it just happened today, on your role in AI communication, how to use AI and where's the human element. So take advantage of that. And then, reach out to us. It all starts with a conversation, right? And whether it's for you, whether it's for team, and honestly, even if it's just for you, we have open enrollment courses that you can come and take for yourself. So look, it all starts with the discussion, and we'd be happy to chat with you.
Awesome. And I'll definitely put that in the bio.
Thank you.
Everyone can click on that and see it. So before we go, man, it's been so much fun talking.
Yeah.
I love talking leadership, especially with so many people that I'm connected with, but I
don't die on me, Tavius. Don't die.
No.
Fix My Fees needs you.
So one thing I like to see people outside. We're all trying to help people change the world. But I also like to people know, like, some of us are just regular people, right? So outside of work, what is it that you like to do when you're not helping people?
Yeah, well, I've got 3 kids. I've got 3 young kids, 14-year-old boy, 10-year-old boy, and 7-year-old girl. So they're just at great ages where, I get to spend a lot of time doing fun things that I didn't expect I do. I think it's one of the most fascinating things, being in the influence and communication business, just what the limitations of those skills are. I thought, I'll be able to influence my kids. It's like, these aren't the, no effect whatsoever. So, and then personally,
feel the way I want to, because I do that.
Yeah. These aren't the droids you're looking for. They're like, come on, Dad, we're going to do what we want. And then, for me personally, what I love to also do is, I'm a cyclist. So I spend a lot of time on the bike, which to me is like the ultimate kind of antidote to talking all day. And, then you kind of put the legs to work and you can just fly. So yeah, I'm really, really lucky. I got a full life, great wife, great kids, and a more recently winning Super Bowl team, I'm sorry to say, than the Cowboys. So life is good.
Make sure you give me a stab on the way out. I love it.
I can't resist.
Oh, man. Even though you are an Eagles fan, I still had an amazing time with you.
Likewise. See, Cowboys, Eagles, we can come together.
Yeah, we can come together until September.
That's right. Well said.
But Bart, thank you so much. I do believe leadership is one of the things that is absolutely necessary in the way that we run literally everything from home life to jobs to the government, right? But I also think it is one of the things that are often just done and not talked about and not enhanced, or people don't think about growing. It's like you just automatically have it or you don't. That's how a lot of people see it. And so bringing you on here, I want people to see that, like, you can work on it. You can grow without just experience beating you down. And you go, well, I've learned the hard way for 30 years, right? There are ways to, navigate those spaces from all directions. And having someone like you to be able to do that with them is pretty awesome. So thank you for coming on.
It's been a real pleasure coming on. You've asked some great questions, and you're right. It's a skill and you can work at it. And that's just what I leave everyone with, put the time in and build your own authentic leadership presence.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'm going to make sure I put everything into the comments. And I know there are a lot of you here that are aspiring leaders, to people who are already in leadership. And I even personally get messages on how to do certain things. This is the guy, right? Some of y'all have asked me about certain leadership qualities, and I love it. I can help you as much as I can, but I am not the expert at that. Somebody like Bart is. So if you're listening and you know who you are that's reached out to me, please reach out to Bart. So thank you so much to everyone else that is listening too. I appreciate you guys tuning in with me every week. So make sure that you like and subscribe so you can come back and see who else. And if you have a business like Bart that you feel is unique and you're doing great things, reach out to me at Tavius@fixmyfeesteam.com so we can see if you're a good fit for our podcast. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you again one more time, Bart. But everybody, have a wonderful day.